chapter 6, verses 4 through 6 is where we're going to start. Two different commentaries label this section of verses as God's frustration with Israel. I wrote down the definition of frustration. Here it is right there. Frustration, a deep, chronic sense of or state of insecurity and dissatisfaction arising from unresolved problems or unfulfilled needs. Does God ever get frustrated?
Never.
All right. Let's just talk about that. God is never surprised. I'm taking issue, what I'm doing here, I'm taking issue with them using the word frustration as it pertains to God. God is never surprised about anything. There is nothing that happens that he did not know beforehand that it was going to happen. Now I want to read verse 4 to you. Verse 4 says this. What can I do with you, Ephraim? What can I do with you, Judah? Your love is like the morning mist, like the early dew that disappears. This verse starts out sounding like a father of rebellious children, where there is nothing he can do or nothing he will do, knowing it will not change their behavior. I wanted him to hear this. Okay? Parents do get frustrated with their children because they try everything, right, Eva? They try everything, and nothing they do works. They get to the end and say, I don't know what else to do. That's what this sounds like, but that's not what this is. In the history of Hosea's book, there are definitely unresolved problems, but God knows exactly what needs to be done, and he will do it. It is called judgment. We might call it tough love. He exercises, not wanting to judge them, but he is at the point where he has to judge them, so he has to exercise tough love, and he judges them. Is he unhappy with their situation? Sure. He doesn't like the Jews, the Israelites, being in the condition they're in, watching them flounder around in darkness. Sure. Is he insecure? Is he insecure because of the situation he sees? Is he just shaking in his boots because I just don't know what to do? No, he's not insecure. Is he dissatisfied with now think about this one, is he dissatisfied with their behavior and lack of desire to know God?
Sure.
Yes, he is. This section of Scripture is not an expression of God's frustration in how to deal with them. It is a lament of his disappointment with them. God can be disappointed. I mean, he can know what's going to happen beforehand, but that doesn't take away his disappointment. If you know something is going to happen that's not good, you know it's going to happen, you're going to be disappointed when it happens, even if you knew it was coming. God knows this is coming. He's not frustrated, he's disappointed, and this is about his disappointment. He has warned them, chastened them to wake up, and promised hope if they will only repent. So the question is, what more can he do? Just like the parent says, what more can I do? God says, where'd it go? What can I do with you, Ephraim? What can I do with you, Judah? Furthermore, he is talking to the whole house of Israel. The neat thing about Hosea is that not only is it a letter, book written just to the northern kingdom. It's also written to the southern kingdom, Judah. Okay? But here he's talking to the whole house of Israel. Ephraim, the northern kingdom, who is going through increasing apostasy, and right now, and Judah, the southern kingdom, who will go through it more and more as time goes on. Because we had this time right here of Assyria coming for the northern kingdom, and from 722 to 586, the northern kingdom's kind of out of the picture, but Babylon, the southern kingdom, is still going through apostasy, and they're just getting worse and worse and worse. So he's directing some of this to both the whole house of Israel, which would be northern kingdom and southern kingdom. He goes on to speak through metaphors. In their relationship with God, he says they are like morning clouds, which have beauty but no substance. Speaking of their relationship with God, they have beauty but no substance. And early dew represents the expression of love, which is superficial and quickly disappears. That's the way he sees their relationship. It's just superficial. There's nothing to it. What I find interesting, I wish Blake was here to hear this, he'll be in here in a minute, but what I find interesting is in the New American Standard, it says loyalty rather than love. There with early dew, it says your loyalty is like the morning mist or the early dew. Your loyalty. That's just like, what is loyalty? You're either loyal or you're not, right? You're loyal or you're not. You can say, well, I love, but just I'm not always completely loving. But loyalty, you're either loyal or you're not. He says you're not loyal. It's like the early mist. It quickly disappears. Okay, let's look at verse 5. Therefore I cut you in pieces with my prophets. I killed you with the words of my mouth. My judgments flash like lightning upon you. This has to do with the prophets God sent to the people to declare to them what they can expect in the form of discipline and judgment if they do not love God, even love God with all their heart. Now this is something you have to think about. God says, I want you to love me. How do you just decide I'm going to love God? Are you a robot? You just turn that switch on? Here's what I think. Let me say this is not a declaration to do something they're not capable of like robots, but at least they should start the process of love for God and grow into it. That's how we love people. We might just like them in the beginning. That's why you come to love your wife or your husband. You like them in the beginning. You didn't love them the minute you met them. You like them. And then as time goes on, you spend time with them, and that process of love grows. You get more and more and more, till sooner or later, hopefully you love them with all of your heart. And that's what God is expecting, and he sent his prophets to tell them that. And of course, what did he do to the prophets? What they do to the prophets? They killed them because they didn't like the message. All right. Verse 6. Now we've seen this before. For I desire mercy, not sacrifice, and acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings. God wants mercy or love, depending on your translation, not sacrifice. What's the difference in those two things? What's the difference in love and sacrifice?
Sacrifice, you can give anything without any feeling of love.
It's just something you do.
Yeah, it's just a process.
Hey, y'all.
Hey.
Hello.
Come on in here. I'm glad y'all showed up.
Yeah.
Dawn was going to be here. I got her in front of witnesses to say she'd be here, and then she said she's not going to be here.
Oh no.
Tyler and Jan were here, and they had to leave.
Oh no.
You
Is
know,
everything
Billy.
okay?
Yeah, long story.
Gotcha.
Anyway, Billy's not, so all of a sudden we got a quorum, Wayne.
Woo!
We get to.
I mean, you had the
We get to have
quality.
a
We're just
vote.
adding the quantity.
Yeah, I know, nowhere. No,
We get to have a vote.
I think the cream of the crop just came in here. We just couldn't really have functioned without them, could we?
Well, we'll start over.
Yeah.
Don't have
What's
to do
more
that.
from the
From the
top?
top.
Okay, Hosea 1:1. All right, we will go back to the beginning of verse 6. So, verse 6 says, "For I desire mercy, not sacrifice, and acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings." So what we're trying to do is establish the difference between mercy and love versus sacrifice. And we said sacrifice is something you don't need anything except something to sacrifice, to do a sacrifice. It's just something you do. The original intent of it was to love God and do the sacrifice because you love God. But we all know that they reduced that to ritual. Okay? So he said, I want love and mercy, not sacrifice. And he wants acknowledgement of God, not burnt offerings. It's the same thing. He said, I want you to have knowledge of me. And I think that's really interesting. The NIV continually says acknowledgement of God, but what it really means is knowledge of God. Back in chapter 4, verse 1, it said this. Let me just go back and read it because I love this verse. Chapter 4, verse 1 says this. Hear the word of the Lord, you Israelites, because the Lord has this charge to bring against you who live in the land. There is no faithfulness, no love, no acknowledgement of God in the land. So he says this over and over through Hosea. There is no faithfulness. There is no knowledge of God. How can you get knowledge of, the problem was with the priest. They had no knowledge of God. They're the ones that's supposed to be given the knowledge of God. And if they don't have it, they can't give it. So the people grow up not having any knowledge of God. He says, I want you to have knowledge of me, not burnt offerings. So it's the same thing. The burnt offering is just another ritualistic thing that we do, and it's a sacrifice. But he said, I want you to do it out of knowledge of me, relationship with me, all of those things. That's what I want. So God wants relationship, not religious ritual, born out of pride and arrogance. All right. So you got here just in time for this because this is kind of interesting. Verses 7 through 10 is about the sins of the priest. More of that. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of that about the sins of the priest in this book from here on out. This is the first of 5 sections that deal with the unfaithfulness of priests and the political leaders. We're going to get into government. In this section, we will see how the sins of the priest defile the whole nation. A good point to remember, the ugliness we individually get involved with invariably spills over into the lives of other people. So just because you say, hey, this is what I want to do. I know it's wrong. I know it's sinful. I know I'm not supposed to be doing it. So I'm going to do it. It doesn't affect you. It's me. Well, if it's your child or it's your husband or it's your wife, it's going to spill over. It's not just you. It's going to affect them too because you're in the family. The priests are doing all this stuff and it's going to affect the whole nation. That's the point I was trying to make. Okay, so verse 7, 8, and 9 deal with 3 cities. And this first one I think you're going to find interesting. I did not know this. I don't think I ever heard it. At Adam. The first city is Adam. Now I want to tell you, this actually works out to be a pun on the name Adam. We're going to talk about it. But it's a city named Adam. Do you know what happened at that city? Have you ever heard of the city Adam? I never heard of it either. I don't think I've ever read it. But a famous thing happened there. We're going to talk about it. The second city is Gilead, and the third city is Shechem. The people of these 3 cities, the people of the northern kingdom, are likened to the people of these 3 cities. That's why they're they're used as examples. That's what happens all the time through the Bible. He uses one thing as an example to make a point of another set of people. You are like these guys are like this, you are like them. All right, verse 7 says this. Now, verse 7 says this. Like Adam, they have broken the covenant. They were unfaithful to me there. There, that's a place. It starts out talking like it's a man, like Adam, but it goes on to say, unfaithful to me there. Now I want to tell you, I got all these different translations of that verse. NIV says, as at Adam. The later NIV does. Mine didn't, but mine said like Adam. Wayne's got the later, it says like Adam. ESV says like Adam. New American Standard says like Adam. So we're starting to say, well, like Adam. King James says, but they like men have transgressed the covenant. But they like men. So they go to a generic name. Rather than saying Adam, they go to man. Okay? The CSB says like Adam. The CEV says at a place named Adam. That's pretty specific. At a place named Adam. Good news. Well, good news is a paraphrase. Holman Christian CSB says, but they like Adam, and the ISB says like Adam. Okay, so you've got all this mixture of things, and what actually? I went through the list. So you got two choices of what to do with this. You can say, well, we're talking about a man's name, a real man named Adam, or we're talking about a place named Adam. You got to make your decision. You can't do it from that list, because you got various and sundry ways you can look at it. The prophet Hosea the end result of all this was he has made a pun on the name of a city named Adam and the name of the original transgressor, the man named Adam. It's a pun of the two things, the city and the man. And the NASB and the ESV seem to be the best. It would appear that the prophet Hosea has chosen the city for its namesake, but since verse 8 and 9, he chose it for his namesake to be a city, because verse 8 and 9 also deal with cities. So ends up with three cities rather than, and there is a city in the Bible named Adam. It occurs one time. We're going to look at it because I think it's so interesting what happened there. Okay, so he said that Adam, they said, what it says, they transgressed, broke the covenant, like Adam or at Adam, where they broke the covenant. What actually happened, go to Joshua 3. I want you to see this with your own eyes. I've been reading the Bible a lot of years, and I don't remember ever seeing this. Joshua 3:16. Joshua 3:16. They were crossing the Jordan, and, they crossed the Red Sea. What happened? Water divided, the lake, the sea divided, they walked through on dry land. That happened 2 other times in the Bible, not at the Red Sea, but on the Jordan River. Did y'all know that? Have you heard of that? The water backed up in a heap. They needed to cross the Jordan, stopped the river, and it just backed up. Well, that happened at a city named Adam. Look at 3:16. The water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away at a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarethan. I don't remember ever seeing that. That's the only place in the Bible where there's a city named Adam. The only place. while the water was flowing down the sea, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to read 17:2. The priest who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan, while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed crossing on dry ground. Okay, so you really don't have anything bad. In fact, what I see happening there was good. We're talking about Adam, something bad happened. They transgressed the covenant. So I think what that means is we're talking about a pun on names, but we're actually talking about what the man Adam did. You're like the man Adam, but they've got this pun going, so you end up with a city name. Does that make sense?
Well, and it
Sort.
also, doesn't it say there?
There. Yeah, it's like he's talking about a place.
Yeah.
But nothing bad happened there. I mean, they were showing great faith to need that river to back up so it could cross, and it did that. So they weren't breaking any covenant there, I don't think. So I think it does look like they're talking about a place, but I think they're talking about that place as a city because he's got two other cities in mind he's going to be talking about in verse 8 and verse 9. I think that's all there is to it. I can't find any other way to look at it other than a pun, because you start reading 2 or 3 commentaries and they start saying this various and sundry things, and you got to figure out, well, which one's right. I think that's what it is. That's what they seem to think anyway. So the bottom line is they are not faithful to God. The people of the northern kingdom are like the people of Adam, the town Adam. They are like the transgressor man named Adam. They are like him. They are unfaithful to God. That's what we're talking about. Okay, verse 8 is about another city named Gilead. It says, Gilead is a city of wicked men stained with footprints of blood. This stuff makes you want to study the Old Testament. There's a lot of stuff in the Old Testament. Another city is mentioned here, Gilead. Gilead is another city which has been singled out where murder reigned and covenant obligations were ignored. Now I want to tell you, the last 2 or 3 weeks we've been talking about a lot about murder. A lot about murder. And in fact, I think I mentioned, I can't remember if y'all were here that week or not, but I mentioned Dallas at the time that I wrote my notes had 100 murders in the first few months of the year. And by the time I could teach the lesson, they had 5 or 6 more. Now they got a bunch of more. They keep having more and more murders in Dallas. What happened yesterday in El Paso? 21 people. I don't know what the count is now. 21 people murdered by that guy. And then it's either earlier in the week or last week, there was another mass shooting somewhere else, and I can't remember where it was. Huh?
This morning at 1 a.m. in Dayton, Ohio.
In Ohio? There was one this morning?
Yeah.
How many people?
It was Ohio this morning.
This morning, yeah.
Okay, I saw.
There were, I think, 10 killed and 26 injured.
Okay. This stuff that we're talking about in the Bible, in the Northern Kingdom, was part of the culture. I'm not saying every single person there was a murderer, but it was part of the culture. Murder is part of our culture. We're not murderers, but it's for sure part of our culture. I mean, who wants to walk down in downtown Dallas at 2 o'clock in the morning by yourself? Why would you not want to? Afraid you might get killed, because that's just what happens down there. It's part of the culture. Okay, so some famous events occurred in Gilead. Jacob prepared to face Esau. I don't know if you remember that little episode. You know, they went this way and this way. They built their kingdoms, their empires, and then they were going to meet. Jacob's knees were knocking together because he thought Esau was coming to kill him. So you remember what he did? He sent the women and the children out first to meet Esau. I thought that was funny. And then he kept sending them out there. Pretty soon, Jacob had to go himself, and of course, everything was fine and nothing happened. So that was one of the things. Jacob wrestled with the angel of the Lord there. And another there was well, the other one we're not going to have time to talk about. It was more of something else. We'll do it another time, though, I promise. So Gilead is said to be full of wicked men, where the ground is stained with blood. 1 Kings 2:5. Let's look at it. 1 Kings 2:5. See if I can remember why I brought that up. See, there's murder all over the Old Testament. I can get to it. 1 Kings 2:5. Now you yourself know what Joab, son of Jeruiah, did to me, what he did to the two commanders of Israel's armies, Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Zer. He killed them, shedding their blood in peacetime as if in battle, and with that blood stained the belt around his waist and the sandals on his feet. He killed those people as if in how do you put it? In wartime, as if in battle. That means, but it was peacetime. So what did he do? He murdered them. He murdered them. He stained his belt, and so much blood he stained his shoes. So Hosea used this event to define the culture he says the northern kingdom is living under. He says, you were like that. You were like that. The city streets are pictured as being tracked with blood from the murderer's sandals. Just walking around in blood. Killed you there, I walk around in your blood, and I walk out around. Walk out on the sidewalk, down the street, leaving a trail of blood behind me. Okay, that's Gilead. Oh yeah, as an aside here, I said, no, I'm going to save that for later. Okay, verse 9 has to do with a city called Shechem. Let's read verse 9. This one's really crazy. Verse 9, as marauders lie in ambush for a man, so do bands of priests. They murder on the road to Shechem, committing shameful crimes. The priests, that's who we're talking about, the priests. The city here is Shechem. The people mentioned here are priests, said to be like a band of marauders who lie in wait to ambush and commit shameful crimes, including murder. The city also, just to be fair, this is what the Chamber of Commerce would put out. The city had things like, did I list them? Yeah. Rehoboam was appointed as king there. Rehoboam, remember who that was? That's Samuel's son. He was the first king. He was the one that was rejected by 10 of the tribes that led to civil war. Solomon's son was kind of anointed as king. He said, we don't want him. We have a civil war, so the northern kingdom comes into it. So that's one of the things that happened to Shechem. The bones of Joseph are buried there, supposedly. That's what I was told. Because of the city of they became a city of refuge where people guilty of accidental murder or manslaughter could go for refuge. Look at it, Joshua 20 verse 9. Let's take a quick peek at this. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of this. Joshua 20. Joshua 20. I remember this. I forget from time to time. Chapter 20, verse 9. Any of the Israelites or any alien living among them who killed someone accidentally, which would be what we call manslaughter, could flee to those designated cities and not be killed by the avenger of blood prior to standing trial for the assembly. So, if you accidentally kill somebody, you could run to Shechem or several other designated areas, cities, and feel safe there until you get to stand trial. So that's Shechem was one of those places. Okay, so
Kenny,
yes, sir.
the last part of that is that how long could he stay there for the rest of his life if he wanted to and not be bothered by the avenger of blood, the kin, or until the high priest died?
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
And when he died, he was free to leave and be absolved of all that. And who is our high priest?
Jesus Christ.
It's a symbolic of him. That's why that was put there.
That's interesting. Very interesting. So the thing that is these verses are alluding to is in Genesis 34. Let's flip over there. I want you to see it because I can't believe it opened right to it. Genesis 34, 1 through 4. I'm going to read that just as background. Then I'll talk about it a little bit. Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, had born to Jacob. So Jacob was her father, Dinah's father. Leah was her mother. Went out to visit the women of the land. Dinah went out to visit the women of the land. When Shechem, now this is the man named Shechem, not the city named Shechem. I think eventually the city gets named after this man for some reason. But anyway, right now it says, when Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, the ruler of the area, saw her, when he saw Dinah, he took her and violated her. He raped her. Now you can go to various, this is back in the NIV. This translation of the NIV was back in the day when you couldn't say certain things in church, okay? He violated her. He raped her. His heart was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob, and he loved the girl and spoke tenderly to her. And Shechem said to his father Hamor, "Get me this girl as my wife." So that's the background. He sees this girl, he rapes her, then he says, "I want her for my own. Daddy, go get her for me." That's a thumbnail sketch of what actually happened. Now, what is interesting is that Shechem, I wrote down there that he was a Gentile, but I read somewhere else that he's a descendant of, I think he was a Gentile. He wants to marry and live among Jacob's family, and the only way that that could be allowed would be that if he lived as a Jew, which means he would have to be circumcised, which he said okay to. Now what happened is that Levi, who's Levi's daddy? You got 12 tribes, father is Jacob. So Jacob, Dinah's daddy, had 12 boys. They're the 12, what we know is the 12, well, sort of, the 12 tribes of Israel. They get modified down the way, but Levi was one, and Simeon was one. They got really aggravated eventually, and they went into the city, and they killed, I don't know if they killed Shechem. Let's see if I can look back down there. They killed every male in the city. It's a bloodbath. They killed, and I guess that means they also killed Shechem and any of his male relatives. So this was a bloodletting that was not, it was an ungodly thing, wouldn't you say? That's the reason it's put in here. This was a Levi, the father of the priesthood, the first priest. I'm not the first priest. Moses, Aaron was the first one. Anyway, He's the father of the priesthood. Levi was the priestly tribe. And this guy goes out and slaughters all of the men of this town. And in his mind, he says, well, I've got a good reason, but they should know it's God is the judge. We're not the judge. But nevertheless, that's what he does. He goes off and does that. So if the priests were guilty of stuff like this, what's the rest of the people like? That's the point. He says, Hosea says, the assertion that the priests carry out wicked schemes or plans or crimes or atrocities describes Simeon and Levi. Again, the culture of the northern kingdom is said to be like the priest or like the priest who slaughtered the people of Shechem. They're murderers. It's part of the culture. It's finally coming into my mind about a good way to refer to it as. It's the culture. I don't think it's necessarily, even though it says every person is this way and there are no redeeming qualities anywhere, but the point is they are like these things, these examples. We talked about stuff like that back when we studied Jude. We got all that history that we used to go back into, the Exodus and some various and sundry other things. And Jude was saying, you're like they are. Don't become like they are. It's the same thing. You are like the people of these cities. These cities. Okay, verse 10 and 11a. Let me read that. I have seen a horrible thing in the house of Israel. There Ephraim is given to prostitution, and Israel is defiled. As for you, Judah, a harvest is appointed. Bummer. I think Judah's got to say bummer. Anyway, I've seen a horrible thing. What God has seen is, this horrible thing that God has seen is the total apostasy of the house of Israel. Not just the northern kingdom, not just the southern kingdom, but the whole house of Israel. That's what he said. I've seen a horrible thing in the house of Israel. It's talking about the whole house of Israel, northern and all 12 tribes, all of them. And then he goes on and says, I see that, no, he didn't see it. I see it. I see verse 10b like 11. It starts out as a little bit in the loaf, then it spreads through the whole thing if it's left unchecked. And that's what happened. It starts out bad in Ephraim, and it gets worse and worse. He said here, Ephraim is given to prostitution and Israel is defiled. I don't think that, we've talked about Ephraim being another way to express a reference to the northern kingdom. Ephraim, I think here it's one tribe. It starts at one tribe, one section of the northern kingdom, and pretty soon it just spreads the whole thing. It's like leaven in a loaf of dough. It just spreads through the whole thing if you don't do something about it. Then he goes on in verse 11. Now this is the thing. He goes on verse 11 and says, Judah, your time is coming. He said, you can expect a harvest. I'm thinking Judah's saying, oh, heck, your time is coming. Hosea calls it a harvest. Judah is like, all right, if you ever get a chance, go back and read Ezekiel 16. But Judah is like the little sister of that parable in Ezekiel, who does what the big sister does. The little sisters or little brother is always running after the older one. And Judah is seen as the little sister to the bigger sister, Ephraim or Israel, the northern kingdom. In this case, little sister Judah will eventually be worse. The hope was they're going to be worse. It says that in Ezekiel 16:47. Judah, who is 100 years behind, Assyria takes the northern kingdom right there. So from 722 BC to 586, the southern kingdom has all that time to get worse. and they do get worse. They get worse than the northern kingdom was when Assyria took them. And they should have been able to expect the same treatment that Assyria did, except for the promise God made to David that your throne will endure forever. So they can't be destroyed because they got to be there. There has to be a remnant of some kind to experience that promise. So anyway, in this case, little sister Judah will eventually be worse than big sister Israel, and for that a harvest or a judgment is coming to you, Judah. Wow. All right, chapter 7. Just a few verses. We'll try to get 7 verses done. If we don't, we don't. But the last half of verse 11 and 6 in chapter 6 and the first 7 verses of chapter 7 deal with the impossibility of restoration because of sin. 11b through 6, 11b through 7:1 are not promises of salvation. You can start looking at it like it might be a promise of salvation. It's just the opposite. The focus of these verses is on the sinfulness of the people, not a promise of salvation. Let's read it. The last part is 6, 11, and then verse 1. Whenever I would restore the fortunes of my people, whenever I would heal Israel, the sins of Ephraim are exposed and the crimes of Samaria are revealed. They practice deceit, thieves break into houses, and bandits rob in the streets. This is not going to be one of the places you'd want to go on vacation. It's starting to, you just wouldn't want to go to the northern kingdom. Another way to put this verse is, I would love to restore. I would love to heal, but I can't because more sin keeps showing itself. God said, I would love, it just keeps getting worse, is what it's saying. God said, I would love to restore you. I'd love to heal you, but it just keeps getting worse. It does not just pop up. It is God who sees it. That's the thing. I don't think these people really realize that God sees and knows. I don't think they give him another thought. It is God who sees it, sees the sin, and it is the sin that God sees which delays the restoration of the people. He just can't do something that's contrary to his nature. Okay? Some examples prevalent in their culture. It's their culture again. They practice deceit and falsehood. That's what it says. They practice deceit and falsehood instead of righteousness and justice. They steal from private homes. This is crazy. Now, I know, do you think everybody does that way? You think everybody does it? It's part of the culture, so you wouldn't be surprised, I'm guessing, to find out that your neighbor does these things. Or maybe you're guilty of some of them and your neighbor's guilty of the rest. They steal from private homes rather than practicing self-abnegation. Right there. Right there it is. There it is. We hadn't read it in a while. Putting the interest of others before your own. Well, they're not practicing that. Psalm 85:10. This came very close to being our verse of the week today. Psalm 85:10 says this. This is kind of a neat little verse. 85:10. Love and faithfulness meet together. Righteousness and peace kiss each other. Those 4 points. Love, faithfulness, righteousness, and peace are a package. The package, and they don't have it. Okay, verse 2. But they do not realize that I remember all their evil deeds. Their sins engulf them. They are always before me. They are callous and don't seem to trust their deeds as evil. Treat their deeds as evil. I guess they just don't see things the way we see them. They have no knowledge of God. They don't understand how God is. So all this stuff that's going on, stealing, killing, raping, pillaging, whatever it is that's going on that they're doing, they see as doing it to them before they can do it to me. Something of that nature. It's just something they do. I think verse 2 is interesting. It says that they don't realize that God knows and remembers. I think it's more like they don't give God a second thought, but God sees it all and he remembers it all. All right. Their sins engulf them. This is pretty interesting. Their sins engulf them does not mean they are overwhelmed by their sin. It means that they're completely surrounded by their sin, and that's all God sees when he looks at them from whatever angle he's looking. I said in my note here, just wonderful. Totally engulfed by their sin to the point where that's all God can see. All right, 3 through 7. This is kind of interesting. This is about killing kings, murdering kings, assassinating kings. I'm going to read all of the verses, then we'll come back and look at them individually. 3 through 7. They delight the king. They delight the king with their wickedness, the princes with their lies. They are all adulterers, burning like an oven, whose fire the baker need not stir, from the kneading of the dough till it rises. On the day of the festival of our king, the princes become inflamed with wine, and he joins hands with the mockers. Their hearts are like an oven. They approach him with intrigue. Their passion smolders all night. In the morning it blazes like a flaming fire. All of them are hot as an oven. They devour their rulers. All their kings fall, and none of them calls on me. Verse 3, read it again. They delight the king with their wickedness, the princes with their lies. On the surface, it has the look of people being friends with the royal court. They delight the king and his princes, because they delight the king and his princes by joining with him in all kinds of evil deeds. The evil deeds could refer, and this is a speculation, but I think as you go on, you see it's probably true. The evil deeds could refer to earlier conspiracies where a king was killed or assassinated, or maybe some other unknown act. And we went back to 2 Kings 15. We're not going to look at it this morning. We've already looked at it once. But in that chapter, there were 4 different kings in the northern kingdom that were assassinated. Some of them were just in power for just a very short period of time before somebody decided to wipe them out and take over. And what gets me when you're talking about killing a king, who's the successor to a king? Usually, an heir. Yeah, one of his relatives, a son or somebody, you know. So that's what I think about assassinating a king. I'll be looking over the supper table. I hear my brother coming. I wonder if he's got a butcher knife in his hand. But that's what was happening. So this may be what's going on here. It was not uncommon, was the point. In this case, the royal house may be celebrating the anniversary of the current king's rise to power. That there's a party getting ready to go on. We're going to see it in verse 5. But that's what they may be celebrating. Hey, I've been king for a year. Let's have a party. Let's look at verse 4. Verse 4 says, they are all adulterers, burning like an oven, whose fire the baker need not stir, from the kneading of the dough till it rises. These new rulers are called adulterers. I think their adultery could very easily be political unfaithfulness, or it could be sexual immorality, or both. The sexual immorality always goes with men of absolute power. I mean, you see it all the time. Like a hot oven, these people burn in their passion with political power. They are compared to a baker who does not pay careful attention to his duties. His duties are to stir the fire, keep it under control, knead the dough. We're seeing here that he doesn't pay any attention to that. Instead of protecting the king, they are in the plot against the king. Remember back in verse 3, we said it looked like they were friends. They were doing things to delight the king. But really and truthfully, they're not. It's going to become very clear that they're against the king. Verse 5 says, on the day of the festival of our king, the princes become inflamed with wine, and he joins hands with the mockers. We got a party going on. They're celebrating something, and maybe it's what I said. Maybe he's been in power 1 year, so let's have a party. And the king joins hands with the mockers. He is holding hands with somebody who wants to kill him, and he doesn't realize it. These are not wise advisors like David had, like Daniel to Nebuchadnezzar, or Nathan to David. Those were wise advisors to the king. These guys.
I think the important thing here is there's spiritual adulterers. When he says adulterer, it's speaking spiritually as well as physically.
Yeah, spiritually.
More importantly, it's spiritual.
And in this case, it's going to be political too. So there's no loyalties.
It's a physical thing.
Yeah. So these guys are just disrespectful people, and verse 6 says that they're bent on intrigue, or they have wicked plans. Let's look at verse 6. Verse 6 says, their hearts are like an oven. They approach him with intrigue. Their passion smolders all night. In the morning it blazes like a flaming fire. They've stayed up all night drinking. They're smashed. And where a good and wise person would be under control, these guys have hearts full of out-of-control passion like a hot oven, an unattended oven. A responsible baker would stir the fire, but these guys let it turn into a blazing inferno without giving it any attention. I don't know how that happens, but that's what it says. Their hearts are blazing with passion, and blazing with passion and intrigue against the king. Nearly through here. Verse 7 says, all of them are hot as an oven. They devour their rulers. All their kings fall, and none of them calls on me. This is something. In their approach to the king, they kill him, and probably have plans to kill any future king that comes along. God says none of these violent people ever inquire of him about what they're doing. That's kind of a surprising comment. Look at the last part of verse 7. It says, none of them call on me. I want to read something to you. We're just that close to being through. None of them call on me. None of them call on me. These murderers do not seek him to gain wisdom. They have the scoffing mockers to guide them. They do not wait for God to send a prophet to anoint the next king. They depend on cunning, plots, and deceit to remove and set up new kings. They are not concerned about doing what delights God because they are only concerned about what delights themselves. They do not even ask God for help because they slyly make alliances with one group or another to protect their interests. God's role in choosing each new king for the nation is usurped by vicious plots to grab power through violence. Now here's the thing, here's what I make of that. And I think it's very interesting. And you got to think about their culture. Culture is the word I think that I've come to accept for the Northern Kingdom. All this stuff is part of their culture. Why would God think that these guys should be calling on him? Because they're the guys that should be, under normal circumstances, would be calling on him. And under these normal circumstances, they don't. Do you understand what I'm saying? We've got a culture here that is totally devoid of God. Back in chapter 4, verse 1, he said they have no knowledge of God. We're talking about seeing all this intrigue, all these wicked plans, all these murders, all these rapes, all this stuff we've been talking about since day one in here. And these are the people that ordinarily would be godly. They would have the knowledge of God, but they have nothing. So he's not surprised that they don't call on him. He's just saying they ought to be calling on him, but they don't. So that's what this is about. So we'll just stop there and